Alright guys, welcome to this continuation of the last session, and I'm really sorry. Right, I'm going to start by apologizing because, well, not for something I did in the but look, I was recording this video, at least I thought, while I was doing the entire update, only for me to realize that it wasn't recording. Okay, and that was after I've already given my outro speech. So I have to now make it, it's going to be shorter. Well, at least it's good showing you the implementation. And for the last video, we had some really messed up code, right? And what I was explaining to myself, thinking I was explaining to you, is that you see, the most ideal way of doing this is to, as you can see, you never had this, like I said, I was explaining to myself. The most ideal way of doing what we're doing for the subject or for whatever we're doing is to extract each of these system policies to their own annotations, right? So that you can write implementations which are specific to the use case of this annotation. And this will also follow the single responsibility principle for quality design patterns, right? Or design principles, right? But what we are doing, which is a terrible approach, well, and this box for this test case, is that we are using one annotation, right, and passing the policies as variables. Now, why this? If you're just checking just the policy, it's kind of okay. But when you start implementing business rules and those business rules change, and then you start having different kind of sources and things like that, it becomes very complicated, and you start relying a lot, like you saw on our last video, on a lot of Java reflection and some really messed up bad code that leaves your backend really vulnerable and unstable. Basically, it can break. So, very important when you're doing this, go with the approach of extracting your policies into annotations so that you could keep them on top of the method themselves. And you could put each annotation is going to have its maybe its argument that you're going to pass, and then you're going to use now with the aspect-oriented programming. You're going to catch it, and then you're going to implement it. So, like you see this example here, you could, in order to update a user, you probably need to have a read permission to be able to read a user, okay, and then update a user, right? You also probably need like a write permission, right, which is like an update and then a write permission or something like that. So the update might be the requirement to be able to change information, and then the write might be the requirement to write to the database or something like that for that particular user. So you could have a bunch of annotations, right? So you can require user write and whatever it is that so the update could actually be user right? Whatever it is that you call your annotations, you could do them like that. And it's going to check chronologically, and it's going to check the user reads, the user update, and the user write, making sure that all the policies are present. And then secondly, all the how do you call it, the business rules are present. So you could have your system policies quite alright, okay, but in the checks, in the aspect, you don't want to have a single aspect like this or annotation like this. You want to extract them into their own separate policy, each policy to their own separate annotation. And within the annotations, you're going to check each policy separately. It allows for separation of concern and making sure that each annotation and each aspect that you create is going to be responsible for handling one particular annotation and authorization check, and that allows you to properly secure and reduce unknowns and unstable code, like we saw in our last video that I was doing. But for today, I just went ahead to just complete the resource, and what I did was, rather than passing the resource class here, I changed the authorization context, right? So I changed the authorization context, and I have like a source builder, which is a generic, which is an interface which I built, which we created, which is where is it? It's secure source, and it has a method. And what happens is that all our sources, for example, if we have, if so, user is our secure source or resource, right? All our resources are going to implement this interface and then implement the method, right? And basically it's going to allow us, get the different um, attributes of this particular resource. And this is much faster than Java reflection and much more preferable. Okay. Um, Once we do that, then we come to the authorization aspect. And again, in the proper way of doing it, we're going to have an authorization aspect for each annotation which represent each policy check. Okay, and so you could do a lot of things here. Right here, this is rubbish, but for demo purposes, this works. And then we just use the annotations. We're getting the class that we're passing. So if we do the initial check, then we get the business rule. Then we get the object, we get the arguments. We're trying to get the ID, and then we also we assume again we're implementing it as if we're implementing a single annotation. And so in this case, we're just assuming that it's going to be done along, so we try to cast it to along, and then that way we're able to now use the user repository. And this again, like I said, I explained all of these things when you guys were not here. I thought I was talking to you guys. Is that what we are doing is that we are now implementing as if we have a single annotation on that method. Okay, so with the single annotation, say we have a user update, we know that okay, I'm going to use like a user repository. So we have like the user repository there. Right? So really you have a lot of knowns when you really divide your work into that, or you take that approach. So we have that, and then now we can now call the builder, the authorization builder, which we've changed a lot. We've taken source and resource, and we just put the resource, but also remove the ID that was there. And now that we have that, we can now go now to the resource evaluator and implement the code properly. So you could go through the code and try to understand it, but the simple demo was basically I went to the database. Sorry, oh, I have closed it again. Like I said, it was so go to the business rule. If you go to the business rule, the last time we had subject here, I've changed it, it's resource now. And so if we had just to make sure that it's hitting here, we run it in the button, we put an annotation, a breakpoint there. And if I try to send a request now again, the breakpoint is going to hit in the resource evaluator rather than the subject evaluator. Okay, remember these are two different evaluators. So it's going to hit the resource evaluator, and that works now, right? But again, one thing you should really look at, this is same thing, right? You can do the same implementation, different implementation for the environment, but one thing you should get out of this video that I want you to really get out of the video is that this approach we're using, where you use a single annotation and then you pass the policies as arguments in a list, it's not the best approach. It's really going to give you some problems down the line, as we've seen. a lot of Java reflection, slow codes, unstable code, silent bugs, and a lot of fails. So what you want to do is extract this into its own extract each policy into its own annotation, allowing you to create aspects for each of them, and implement the authorization, load the business rule with respect to this particular policy, and you can reuse that now safely among related methods that will require, that follow the same pattern and that will require that particular notation. So that's all. I hope that this makes sense and this helps you in your development. And this has been great, a very good learning process too for me. It's been insightful, and hopefully sometime within this month, happy new month by the way, we are going to see me build like at least a better approach or a better secure system using taking into account tenants, or maybe different tiers of users within our system, not just admin stuff like that, but more of like maybe you're a pro user, you're a common user, or you are a super user, like different plans, like to kind of simulate plans and see how plans work. And you use plans to guide business rule. For example, um, how does a user read? How much content does a user read based on their plan? So business rules are going to be tied to that too. So hopefully this gives you an insight, a significant insight on how business rules are being coupled with system policies to secure and allow for proper management and usage of business resources, right? So thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.